Hi everyone, today we'll be introducing a legal studies activity, which is the foundations of understanding how to structure and write and break down a Band 6 essay using past HSC questions. Our names are Damien, Evan, Grace, and Melody. So tips and tricks. This is a 2025 HSC long response question on shelter, and I quote, "Non-compliance challenges the effectiveness of the law. To what extent is this statement accurate in relation to shelter?" When students are looking at practice questions as they are attempting to answer and address the question, they might panic, right? But that's okay. Breaking down the question so it's more digestible will be easier as students plan out how to structure the essays. Step 1. Make a comment. Judge how non-compliance, which is no ratification of international law into domestic law, affects the right to shelter and how it is addressed for vulnerable individuals in our community. Step 2. Make an active effort to use the PEBE criteria, which is a popular mnemonic used by students to evaluate the effectiveness of the law. It stands for protection of individual rights, enforceability, accessibility, resource efficiency, equality, balance, and reflecting community standards. This is a key component when evaluating the question of how effective the law is. Step 3. When the question asks, to what extent, make a judgment. Examples of answers include to a significant extent, to a moderate extent, and to a poor extent.
It is also beneficial that we first provide students with a list of words, as it reduces the cognitive load of having to memorize the words or definitions and instead focus on the construction of legal arguments and how they contribute to the analysis. As stated by LLN, this quick and efficient access frees up cognitive space and allows for words to be easily understood in context. Referring back to LLN, our activity strains the importance of understanding words introduced in the course before engaging in essay construction. She expresses productive modes of expression, such as speaking and writing, requires students to understand more nuanced aspects of words to use them appropriately and precisely in context. In doing so, we are prompting students in higher thinking and deep knowledge through first establishing and unpacking the core subject terminology. It also increases the likelihood that students will be able to use legal terminology more in their own writing and improves their confidence in future class discussions. Introducing a scaffold alongside newly established subject-specific terminology creates an environment of high support and high challenge. Referring to Mariani's 4 zones model, we can infer that our activity will evoke a coherent environment for engagement and learning, mirroring Vygotsky's notion of the zone of proximical development. Ultimately, this grants a substantial opportunity for all, with particularly EALD students, to engage more with the activity as they are able to familiarize themselves with the terminology before they analyze more complex passages that use these words.
Introduction. Highlighting. When students are starting to write their essays, it is vital to annotate their work for them to recognize what is needed and missing. Make a legend using different colors for the LCMS, which is legislation, case, media, and statistics, alongside one in order to identify the PEBE evaluation.
A strength of this literacy activity is that it encourages students to apply subject-specific vocabulary for legal studies and essay writing, which promotes deeper understanding of the words they use, while also practicing academic writing. This is supported by elements, as the study conducted recommended that teachers provide students with more opportunities to engage in either discussion or writing to further develop deeper thinking, more than just passive activities such as simply searching up the definitions of these subject-specific words. Furthermore, tapping into Gibbons, our activity evokes the notion of substantive conversation and intellectual quality. Through the scaffold's high support, the ample provocation of discussion and engagement with the subject's core terminology creates a growing environment where students can explore meaningful dialogue. Not only will the activity elicit student-teacher discussion, but it will also extend to peer-to-peer, which will generate discussion and thus understanding on how they should construct their essays.
Introduction. Scaffolding. When constructing a Band 6 legal studies essay, it is important to include the vital components of an introduction, which outlines the relevant legislation and directly interacts with the question being asked and mentions the controlling ideas that you'll be talking about throughout the essay. In the main body paragraphs, aside from the main idea alongside the pure paragraph structure, LCMS, and PEBE, choosing whether to deep dive into either non-legal responses or legal responses would be a key factor in strengthening their essays.
A limitation of this activity is that it primarily relies on essay writing as a way for students to develop their understanding of legal terminology and how to structure their arguments. This teaching method is effective in meeting the high literacy demands of the subject, however, it might not be catered to students who prefer a different delivery method. This is supported by LLN 2019, where it is stated that both class discussions and writing require more depth of processing, which means that some students might be more engaged with the lesson if they can work collaboratively with their peers in order to structure their own argument. This can make the lesson more interactive while also combining the two methods rather than in isolation. This focus on essay writing will also disadvantage EALD students because they may find it harder to develop their own confidence in using English through writing, as it is distinctly different to the English used on a daily basis, which is supported by Henderson 2019. Without these opportunities to work collaboratively with students, EALD students are disadvantaged as they would not have any deep understanding of the legal concepts or the literacy skills required to independently create their own arguments. The challenges that these students face must be taken into account as they are required to develop their English speaking skills as well as develop their knowledge of legal terminology used to answer certain questions. This creates a barrier for them to achieve positive learning outcomes, which is supported by LLN 2019. As cited in LLN 2019, a study was conducted that found positive effects on class participation when students were presented with open-ended questions central to the topic that required use of evidence and reasoning.
Scaffolding. Using a scaffold such as this one allows students to become used to the necessary components of the essay, and gradually they become accustomed to the layout and build confidence they will go to address and answer questions without prompt help. For example, for this contemporary issue of housing affordability, breaking down the case allows students to see the process of dismantling it, including the terminology in the essay. Highlighting the legislation allows students to understand the basics of what the piece of law safeguards as they annotate and pick through the articles or media or piece of information, which allows for active interaction with logical reasoning, which helps them become more confident in practicing the structure as they evaluate through PEBE how well the law has addressed the given issue.
As cited in Gibbons 2015, scaffolding is thus the temporary assistance by which a learner knows how to do something so that the learner will later be able to complete a similar task alone. It is future-oriented and aimed at increasing a learner's autonomy. Our application of scaffolding within this activity adheres to this pedagogical practice as we only show students how to write an introduction and an example of what is expected of them when they are arguing their perspective. This reduces the risk of the students passively learning while the teacher does most of the work and promotes more sustained engagement. The approach we take is also aligned with Henderson 2019, suggesting that teachers are to backward design activities to ensure students are able to effectively engage, as it allows teachers to experience and understand the end goal for the student's work. Henderson also suggests that there are conditions for learning, which aid learning in natural settings and help in sustaining participation within the classroom. Hence, in our activity, we demonstrate using the scaffold, encourage engagement, responsibility, and approximation through allowing the students to practice themselves and make their own literary choices to learn from their results. Give opportunity for the students to employ different language, and as teachers we will respond for our students' learning. Worksheet 1 is a paragraph scaffold which provides an example of a completed task to stimulate students into researching and filling out their own in the table below to aid in writing their essay. Worksheet 2 requires students to engage with an example paragraph to identify relevant information to grasp an understanding for what is required in their writing.
Another limitation of this activity is that the students might become overly reliant on the teacher's model essay, which would cause them to imitate the structure too closely, hence leading to the student thinking that in order for them to meet the literacy demands of this course, they require a more methodical approach. This can diminish their opportunities to critically think and develop their ability to create legal arguments when faced with different scenarios. This also increases the risk of some students who are behind in the content as they will rely too much on the teacher's model answer and not understand the legal concepts, whereas high achievers in the HSC are able to use the terminology correctly, which increases the quality of their answers. Gibbons 2009 supports this idea as it discusses how students should be constantly put in a classroom environment where they are being challenged as they are simultaneously being temporarily supported with the scaffolding. This can further allow them to develop independent critical thinking, which will become more useful in exam conditions. Although the model essay and the legal vocabulary list are effective methods to help students with structuring their arguments and meeting other literacy demands of the subject, it might not be tailored to potential EALD students in the class as well, as they will also try to imitate the model answer due to their limited knowledge of how to write academically in English.